Hi, Jessica. Thanks so much for joining us today. You won the third prize in this year's essay competition, and we thought it would be interesting to chat to you about your essay. Can you just say a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hello everyone. My name is Jess, and I am about to start my PhD in animal law related subject matter, which I'm really excited about. I've just finished up the Lewis and Clark Masters of Animal Law, which is an amazing program. Could highly recommend it, and it's available for online students as well. So that was really cool to meet people from all around the world who are interested in animal law. So I've kind of gradually in the last few years moved more and more into the animal law space from a law background. So that is a little bit about how I came to be here and heard about the competition and the centre and all of the wonderful work you do.
Amazing. And what inspires you to participate in the competition?
Yeah, so I actually went to the centre's conference last year. That was such a cool experience, and it was just freaky coincidence where I had the chance to meet Richard Ryder at that conference, and that was one of the best experiences of my life. And I saw this year's competition. It was a quote from Richard, and it also kind of touched upon Darwin and his work. I read a lot of work on consciousness and how Darwin's evolutionary theory kind of maybe informs that. So I was reading into that subject matter at the time, and all of this kind of coalesced together and inspired me. Hey, let's put all of those interests and life experiences together and sit down and write something for fun.
Perfect. And sort of how did you go about it? How did you approach writing the essay itself?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I always love hearing a little bit about the real life experience of writing. Sometimes you just get the end product and it can be quite an extensive process of drafts and making sure you're really explaining your thoughts as clearly as possible. So there was a bit of that, I guess, through the process, but my style sometimes when I get really passionate about a subject is just sitting down for quite an extensive block and just getting it all out. And then going back and being like, what just happened? And then tailoring that, shifting the paragraphs so the arguments actually make a bit more sense. But I think it's really fun when sometimes you just let yourself have that freedom to write what inspired you to even answer the question in the first place. And that's what I did in this case.
Great. Yeah, really shows the creativity. Absolutely. And sort of turning to perhaps some of the arguments you're making in the essay, which I found really interesting and sort of compelling. You focus on what you call the sort of similarities point, which I think you derive from the essay question. And perhaps you could just start off by telling us how you understand this similarities point, and then we can sort of look into how you apply it. But just maybe starting off, what's the similarities point?
Yeah, for sure. So I did go with a pretty straightforward answering of the question as it was written. And I thought referring to the concept raised in this quote throughout the piece, it's really just a matter of brevity here, which is Darwin's concept that there is a biological similarity between human animals and non-human animals. And then using that, I guess, as the shorthand throughout the piece to refer to what are the implications of that for these debates in the non-human animal law space. So it's really just referring to that central Darwinian concept in the quote itself.
Excellent. And then sort of the first debate that you apply this to and sort of critically discuss, what the merits or potential problems with the similarities point are is the legal personhood debate. Should animals have legal personhood, and the efforts that we've seen, in courts around the world and other venues to, secure legal personhood for animals. So similarities point in that space, go.
Okay, cool. So I think I've been struck by how frequently this similarities point is raised in other words, but I don't think it's too controversial and is often a starting point for people to be interested in animal rights issues or animal law issues, and that is acknowledging the biological reality of our place in relation to animals, which is not that different. It's quite similar. But why is it easy to kind of jump in at that point, and then we live in 2023 and you're still seeing such significant pushback to legal attempts to, I guess, acknowledge this similarity in a more robust way, whether that be legally acknowledging, like granting a habeas corpus case, recognizing legal personhood, or passing sentience provisions in legislation. You're still seeing such significant hesitation to these ideas, and I'm quite fuzzy on why is it so difficult. So that's where I was coming into this personhood topic, and I raised a few examples. You can look at the Tselepy case or the Sandra case, where there's instances of certain courts that have made that jump to granting personhood, but you're still seeing the struggle of projects like the Non-Human Rights Project in the American context, who have put together amazing, extensive cases for animals in the United States to be granted freedom from captivity to an extent, and these have been knocked back quite significantly time and time again. So I think the thrust of that section of the essay is, while it seems obvious that you can get large backing and support for the similarities point, what is the utility of actually accepting that popularity and then trying to harness that to some sort of practical legal change? And I question, because there's been such a continual gap between those two standpoints, maybe is that the most effective entry point? Is that the most effective argument to be making? It's more asking the question at this stage is quite a short essay than providing robust answers to what do we do if it's not accepted. But I think it's worth pointing out, and that's kind of what that section gets into.
Absolutely, yes, that's very interesting. And do you reach a different conclusion in the sort of veganism debate, the second area where you apply the similarities point, or sort of analyze how it's been working within?
Yeah, I think at the point at which I got to the second example that I'd chosen, which was the veganism debate, I think the similar mental roadblocks could be applied in both cases. And I use the example of Angela Fernandez's outrage factor, which is potentially one explanation of why you can maybe acknowledge the biological similarities between human animals and non-human animals, but then kind of hesitate at extending this into any action. And she says that she talks about this outrage of that similarity being taken too far, perhaps. So like potentially the mental outrage of considering, is what I'm eating or a sentient life, or have I been engaging in this lifestyle of consuming potentially sentient beings? What does that mean for me? Does it actually cause me to change my behavior, or am I okay just accepting that that is a sentient life but then continuing to consume that food? So I think that could be one of the roadblocks that separates the acknowledgement of the similarities point and legal change. But I think both of them offer similar presentations of the issue, which is the struggles that lawyers and activists have in achieving change, and it can be frustrating. So
do you think they should abandon sort of the similarities argument, or is it, what other options are there?
I know that's always a question. I mean, I'm not sure that's a good case to say just to ignore that reality, but I think when it comes to political and legal change, as much as there is great value in living principally, and if you're the kind of person who can daily put your principles into actions, that is fantastic. But if you're someone who's trying to achieve change on a greater systematic level, it may be worth considering what these roadblocks are, and if there is an alternative strategy that that is more digestible for a larger audience, I don't think there's something necessarily morally wrong with that. And I use one of the examples is the fashion companies in South Korea that play to human concern for zoonotic diseases, which was, you know, self-interested, and the trade was implicated in that. But that campaign was super effective, right? You're kind of benefiting as a consequence, quite a utilitarian framework, the animals in that situation, but you didn't really raise the similarities point. That wasn't the starting argument framework to convince this large audience to go along with that change. So I'm just exploring a little bit. Is it sometimes better to choose the most persuasive practical techniques? And that is, I think, a controversial position to argue in the animal law space sometimes, but I mean, it's the great wonder of academia and intellectual spaces. You got to ask the questions, see what happens.
Absolutely. And I think the essay did a terrific job doing that. Maybe just sort of to slowly wrap up the conversation here, Jess, how was the writing process for you? Did you find it enjoyable? Was it a struggle?
Oh, no, I love writing. No, research and writing makes me happy. So amazing. I thought it was really an awesome opportunity, and thank you to the Centre for providing this kind of space that might be a little bit outside but adjacent to your major professional work or what you're studying, the projects you have to produce for a degree or a job. And I thought that was quite exceptionally free in that space and actually helped the writing process a little bit. So it is good to jump on the opportunities that don't just go down the straightforward path.
Great to hear. And is that also a piece of advice you'd like to give to future participants?
Yeah, I think that leans into the advice I would give, which is this is quite a unique opportunity in the animal law space to explore these very interesting questions that are posed. And if you do have a even side interest in animal law and you're coming from a different background, it's a great opportunity to explore those questions for yourself, regardless of what happens. So just have a bit of confidence in writing for yourself, I guess.
Excellent. Well, perfect. Well, thanks so much for taking the time for us, Jess, and congrats again on your fantastic essay.
Oh, thank you so much, Raphael, and thank you to the Centre. Absolute pleasure.